What if the joyous homecoming of brave soldiers turned into an unimaginable nightmare, shrouded in mystery, that haunts us to this day? My name is Mike. Welcome to The Scary Secret. If you like stories like this, please like and subscribe. We appreciate all your support. Now, on with the story. It's the early morning of December 12th, 1985. The world is still wrapped in the chill of winter, and in the remote town of Gander, Newfoundland, a group of American heroes is about to board the final leg of their long journey home. These aren't just any passengers. They're 248 soldiers from the legendary 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles. They've spent the last 6 months in the harsh deserts of the Sinai Peninsula, standing as peacemakers under the banner of the multinational force and observers. Their mission? To keep the fragile truce between Egypt and Israel intact after years of conflict. Now, with Christmas just around the corner, they're buzzing with excitement. Families wait back at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Wives, husbands, kids, parents, all counting the hours until reunions filled with hugs, laughter, and holiday cheer. The plane they're boarding is a McDonnell Douglas DC-8 63CF, registered as N950JW, operated by Aero Air under the flight number 1285R. It's a charter flight, call sign Big A, 950, and it's already had a grueling trip. Starting from Cairo, Egypt, it stopped in Cologne, West Germany, for a quick layover before touching down in Gander at 5:34 a.m. local time. Gander International Airport, perched at the edge of the Atlantic, is no stranger to transatlantic stops. Back then, it was a vital refueling hub for flights crossing the ocean, especially in the dead of winter. The weather that morning is unforgiving. Pre-dawn darkness cloaks everything, with overcast skies spitting light snow, snow grains, and a biting, freezing drizzle. Temperatures hover around freezing, the kind that makes your breath hang in the air like a ghost. Some pilots in the area have reported picking up a bit of ice on their wings during approach, but it's nothing out of the ordinary, or so it seems. The Aero Air crew, Captain John Griffin, a seasoned pilot at the helm, First Officer Joseph Connolly, sharp and reliable, and Flight Engineer Michael Fowler, keeping an eye on the systems, go through their routines. The plane has a few minor issues, a hydraulic leak here, a potable water issue there, even a flickering light on one of the thrust reversers. But these are noted, checked, and the show goes on. No one calls for de-icing. It's not deemed necessary. Inside the terminal, the soldiers stretch their legs after the long haul from Egypt. Some grab a bite. Others browse the gift shop for last-minute souvenirs, maybe a maple leaf keychain or a postcard from the snowy corner of Canada. There's chatter about what awaits them. Turkey dinners, decorated trees, the warmth of home after months in the sand. One soldier, Sergeant James D. Phillips, a 23-year-old from St. Petersburg, Florida, might be thinking of his family. He's young, full of promise, stepping into manhood with the discipline of a screaming eagle. Another, Sergeant Brian Lee Dumpert, 26, from Marion, Indiana, a diesel mechanic turned infantryman, proud of his marksmanship and fitness, has even more to look forward to. Back home, his wife has just given birth to their child, a little one he's never met. His sister Lori, who lost their father young and grew close to Brian as a result, can almost picture his grin as he steps off the plane. And then there's Sergeant Ray Anthony Ruth, 24, from Walterboro, South Carolina. Ray's the protective type, the big brother who shielded his siblings from harm, who advised his little brother Tim to think twice about joining the Army, even as he himself served with honor. He discouraged his sister from enlisting, wanting to keep her safe. Ray's family remembers him as the one who brought light to every room, his caring nature shining through even the toughest times. As the clock ticks towards 6:45 a.m., the passengers reboard. The DC-8, now heavy with fuel for the final push to Kentucky, taxis out. There's a last-minute change. Instead of taking off west over the town, they're directed south on runway 22, from the intersection with runway 13. Snow clearance has shortened the available strip to about 9,900 feet, but it's plenty for this bird. The engines roar to life, the brakes release, and the plane hurtles down the runway. 51 seconds later, at an airspeed of around 167 knots, it rotates and lifts off, clawing into the cold air. But something's wrong, terribly wrong. The plane struggles to climb. Its airspeed peaks at 172 knots, then begins to drop. It barely clears the trees at the end of the runway, flying so low that witnesses later say it felt like they could reach up and touch it. Crossing the Trans-Canada Highway, just 900 feet from the runway's end, the DC-8 is perilously close to the ground. Drivers on the road below freeze in horror. One reports seeing a bright glow emanating from the aircraft, a strange illuminating light that cuts through the dawn gloom. From the control tower, controllers watch in disbelief as the plane seems to dip below the tree line, heading toward Gander Lake. Then the unthinkable. About 3,000 feet beyond the runway and 720 feet off the center line, the aircraft, nose high, right wing low, clips the treetops. It carves a brutal path through the forest, the tail section shearing off as it yaws sharply to the right, slamming into a rugged hillside dotted with rock outcroppings. The plane disintegrates in a catastrophic impact. The full fuel tanks erupt in a massive fireball, turning the snowy woods into an inferno. The explosion echoes across the frozen landscape, a thunderous boom that shakes the town awake. Emergency responders race to the scene. Firefighter Gary Tuff arrives around 9 a.m., greeted by a nightmare. Multiple fires raging across a 1,300-foot debris field, charred stumps, and the heartbreaking remnants of lives cut short. Sneakers still laced with what were once feet. He and his team battle the blazes, but one fire in particular, down in a hole about 150 feet from the lake, burns like nothing he's seen. It's a blue flame, torch-like, persisting for 24 hours despite their efforts. Pumps run dry, and at 6:30 a.m. the next day it simply stops, as if switched off. Military police officer Bob Smith secures the perimeter, then joins the grim task of recovery. In a hangar turned morgue, they handle charred remains, many unidentifiable, removing dog tags where possible. The air is thick with the acrid smell of jet fuel and sorrow. No survivors. All 256 souls, those eager soldiers, the dedicated crew, gone in an instant. Back at Fort Campbell, the news hits like a bomb. Families who had been decorating trees and wrapping gifts were shattered. Lori Butler, Brian's sister, feels a void that time can't fill. Zona Phillips, stepmother to James, grapples with the loss of a young man full of potential. Tim Ruth, Ray's brother, honors his memory through stories of protection and love. The nation mourns, with memorials springing up, a service at Dover Air Force Base, tributes by Gander Lake, and enduring honors at the soldiers' home base. But as the smoke clears and the world tries to make sense of the tragedy, questions linger in the frozen air. What turned a routine takeoff into a deadly plunge? Was it the weather, the plane, or something more sinister? The families, the investigators, and the public are left to piece together the puzzle, drawn into a story that refuses to end. The wreckage still smolders in the Newfoundland woods as the first light of December 13th, 1985, creeps over Gander Lake. Firefighters, exhausted and covered in soot, finally get the last stubborn blue flame under control after more than 24 hours. What remains is a scene of utter devastation. Twisted metal scattered over 1,300 feet, personal effects half buried in snow, and the heartbreaking task of identifying 256 souls who never made it home. Military police cordon off the site, but word spreads fast. Families in Kentucky huddle around radios and televisions, praying for miracles that never come. The nation reels. It's the deadliest aviation accident on Canadian soil, the worst single-day loss for the U.S. military since Vietnam. Investigators arrive quickly. The Canadian Aviation Safety Board, or CASB, takes the lead, with observers from the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board and the Federal Aviation Administration joining them. They comb through the debris field, cataloging every piece. The cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder are recovered relatively intact, their tapes holding the last words of Captain John Griffin and his crew. Playback reveals a routine departure, engines spooling up normally, the captain calling rotate, the first officer confirming positive rate, gear up, then silence. No mayday, no panicked calls, just the sound of planes struggling. The stall warning blaring briefly before impact. Eyewitness accounts pour in. Drivers on the Trans-Canada Highway describe the aircraft lumbering low, nose high, right wing dipping. One man swears he saw a bright flash or a glow from the plane just before it vanished behind the trees. Others mention an unusual sound, like a muffled boom or pop. Rescue workers at the scene report something eerie. Many of the bodies show signs of severe burns and trauma, consistent with an in-flight fire or explosion. Carbon monoxide is detected in the blood of some victims, high enough levels to suggest they inhaled it before the final crash. How could that happen if the plane was intact until ground impact? The official team focuses on the wings. Photos and witness statements from Gander Airport show the DC-8 sitting on the ramp for about an hour in light freezing drizzle and snow grains. The temperature is right at freezing, conditions ripe for clear ice to form. Smooth, hard-to-see ice that sticks to leading edges and disrupts airflow. The crew didn't request de-icing, perhaps believing the precipitation was too light or that the short ground time wouldn't allow significant buildup. But tests later show even thin layers can rob a wing of lift, especially on a heavily loaded jet at takeoff speeds. Weight and balance come under scrutiny too. The plane carried 248 soldiers plus gear, Christmas presents, and full fuel for the hop to Kentucky. Aero Air's paperwork shows the load sheet was calculated, but questions arise about accuracy. Some baggage manifests seem incomplete. Soldiers reportedly carried extra equipment. If the center of gravity was off or the total weight underestimated, combined with ice, the plane could have been doomed from the moment it left the ground. As days turn to weeks, the investigation deepens. Autopsies reveal more anomalies. Some pathologists note unusual blast-like injuries on certain remains, patterns that don't perfectly match a simple ground impact and post-crash fire. Toxicology reports confirm elevated carbon monoxide in multiple victims. hinting at a possible in-flight cabin fire or fume event before the crash. Wreckage analysis shows the right wing separated early, but was it due to overload stress or something more violent? Then come the whispers. In the tight-knit community of Gander, locals talk quietly about what they saw that morning. Airport workers insist the plane looked clean. No visible ice when it taxied out. A few claim they heard a loud bang shortly after rotation. Conspiracy theories began to circulate. The soldiers were returning from the Sinai, a volatile region. Could there have been foul play? Rumors of a bomb planted by adversaries, perhaps tied to their peacekeeping role? Some point to the Green Light Team, a specialized unit allegedly on board, carrying sensitive cargo. Others speculate about internal sabotage or even a missile, though radar shows nothing unusual. The CASB commissioners debate fiercely behind closed doors. Most lean towards the ice explanation. It's the simplest, backed by physics and similar past accidents. But 4 members aren't convinced. They issue a blistering minority report, arguing the evidence points to an onboard explosion of unknown origin. They cite the flash witnesses saw, the carbon monoxide levels, the rapid disintegration, and inconsistencies in the ice theory, like why the plane climbed at all before stalling so dramatically. The majority report stands firm. Probable cause is wing icing, possibly compounded by engine thrust loss or improper takeoff speeds. The minority calls it undetermined, with sabotage not ruled out. Families read the reports with growing frustration. For many, ice feels too mundane for such a catastrophic loss. They want answers that match the horror they feel. Memorials rise, plaques by the lake, services at Fort Campbell, but the questions linger like smoke. Why did the stall warning come so late? Why the bright glow? Why the persistent blue flame that burned unnaturally long? Skeptics dig deeper, poring over witness statements, autopsy photos, and declassified documents. They point to the plane's history. Aero Air had maintenance issues, a questionable safety record. The military charter world operates differently. Less scrutiny, tighter schedules. Years pass, but the story refuses to fade. Survivors' families form support groups, pressing for reopened inquiries. Books and documentaries revisit the evidence, highlighting the split decision that left the door ajar for doubt. In Gander, the crash site becomes a place of quiet reflection, where visitors leave flowers and flags amid the trees that still bear scars. The truth, whatever it is, remains buried in those frozen woods, or perhaps hidden in plain sight among conflicting reports and unanswered anomalies. One thing is clear. On that cold December morning, 256 lives ended in an instant, and the mystery of how and why continues to pull us back, searching for closure in a tragedy that defies easy explanation. The years following the Gander crash stretch out like a long, cold winter. Families who lost husbands, fathers, brothers, and sons refuse to let the memory fade into statistics. They gather at annual memorials by the lake, lay wreaths at Fort Campbell, and share stories that keep the pain and the questions alive. The Canadian Aviation Safety Board's majority report points firmly to wing icing as the culprit. Clear ice buildup in those freezing drizzle conditions, reducing lift just enough to doom the overloaded DC-8 on takeoff. It's a conclusion that fits the physics, matches similar incidents in aviation history, and allows authorities to close the file with recommendations for better de-icing procedures and pilot awareness. But not everyone buys it. 4 members of the CASB board, experienced investigators with decades in the field, dig in their heels. They draft a minority report that reads like a quiet rebellion against the official line. These dissenters argue the evidence doesn't add up neatly to just ice. They highlight the eyewitnesses who saw a bright flash or glow from the aircraft moments after rotation, a light that cut through the pre-dawn gloom like a flare. They point to the carbon monoxide found in the bloodstreams of many victims, levels suggesting the gas was present in the cabin before the final impact and post-crash fire. How does icing explain that? They note the rapid breakup of the plane, the right wing detaching early, the tail shearing off, the aircraft yawing violently, slamming into the hill. It looks more like a violent disruption than a gradual stall. The minority commissioners question the performance numbers too. Simulations run by the majority team show the plane struggling under ice and weight, but the dissenters argue the climb profile doesn't match perfectly. The aircraft managed to get airborne, cleared the runway, and, by a slim margin, then lost speed and altitude too abruptly. They suggest an onboard event, perhaps an explosion of unknown origin, could have severed control surfaces, damaged engines, or compromised structural integrity in an instant. They don't name a specific cause outright, but they leave the door wide open, refusing to rule out sabotage or an internal detonation. Word of the split decision leaks, fueling public doubt. Books appear, like one written by a former CASB member who calls the majority conclusion improbable. He details inconsistencies, the unusual persistence of that blue flame in the wreckage, burning hot and steady for hours despite water and foam. Autopsy findings showing blast-like injuries on some remains that seem out of place for a ground impact fire alone, and the lack of definitive proof that ice was even present in amounts sufficient enough to cause a catastrophe. Skeptics latch onto these points, building theories that range from the plausible to the outlandish. One persistent thread ties back to the soldiers' mission. The 101st Airborne had been in the Sinai, monitoring a tense peace between Egypt and Israel. In the volatile Middle East of the 1980s, enemies lurked everywhere. Shortly after the crash, shadowy claims surfaced from jihadist groups asserting responsibility for downing the plane, a bomb planted to strike at American forces. Officials dismissed these as opportunistic propaganda, with no evidence of explosives residue found in the wreckage. Still, the timing raises eyebrows for some. Other whispers circulate in darker corners. Aero Air, the charter operator, carries a reputation for cutting corners. Maintenance shortcuts, questionable oversight in the military contract world. The plane itself had a history of issues. Could a mechanical failure have escalated into something catastrophic? Or was there more? Some point fingers at covert operations, suggesting the flight carried sensitive cargo or personnel tied to classified activities in the region. Rumors swirl of a green light team or special forces element on board, perhaps making the aircraft a target for foreign intelligence. Even wider tales emerge linking it to a broader geopolitical shadows of the era, though hard proof remains elusive. Families feel the weight of the uncertainty most acutely. Parents who buried empty caskets because remains were too fragmented to identify pore over reports, attend hearings, and push for re-examinations. They form alliances, share documents, and keep pressure on lawmakers. Why the conflicting toxicology? Why the eyewitnesses flash ignored and downplayed? Why the minority report buried rather than embraced as a call for deeper inquiry? Their grief turns to determination. This isn't just about closure. It's about truth for 256 lives snuffed out too soon. In Gander, the crash site remains a somber pilgrimage spot. Trees scarred by debris still stand, and a quiet path leads visitors to plaques and flags fluttering in the wind. Locals who responded that day carry memories they rarely share. The smell of burning fuel, the sight of twisted metal, the blue flame that defied every effort to extinguish it. They wonder, too, in private moments, if the full story ever come out. Decades on, the debate simmers. Official inquiries stand by icing, backed by experts and subsequent reviews. Yet the minority voices echo, amplified by documentaries, online forums, and books that revisit the anomalies. Each retelling pulls at the threads, the glow, the gas, the breakup, the flame. Was it truly just weather and human oversight? Or did something more sinister ignite in those final seconds over the Newfoundland's forest? The families, the skeptics, the quiet doubters, they keep asking. And in the asking, they keep the journey alive, drawing us all back to that frozen morning where heroes fell, and the search for answers refused to die with them.